So the big question is this. We know spontaneous remissions and so-called miracle cures exist. We also know they aren't so spontaneous after all. I'm living proof of this, having cured my quote-unquote incurable illness. There's something to how this happens. So how do we, as humans with chronic symptoms, tap into this so-called miraculous healing capacity? That is the question, and this podcast will give you the answers. My name is Dr. Erin Hayford, and welcome to the Sacred Illness Podcast. Before we begin today's episode, just my standard medical disclaimer. This podcast is intended for educational and informational purposes only. The content should not be considered a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always consult with a qualified healthcare professional regarding any medical concerns. Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 20 of the Sacred Illness Podcast. I'm Dr. Erin, and I'm so excited today to have Stormie Carter with us. Stormie is someone that I met kind of synchronistically, it seems. So we've been in each other's lives in various capacities, but today she's coming on to the podcast to share her own personal journey, healing various chronic illnesses, to share the process that she went through, all the twists and turns and ups and downs and things that she discovered, and ultimately how she got onto a path of working with the mind and the body connection, how she started to put those pieces together, and some of the really big shifts and changes she has seen since shifting onto a new path. So welcome, Stormie. I'm so excited. Thank you again for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So let's just delve right in. As we were saying before we started recording, I don't know much of your journey prior to us crossing paths. I know bits and pieces. I know the diagnoses you have and the things you've been working with and kind of the changes you've seen. But, you know, wherever you want to start, I would love to just hear from you how it all got started. Like, where does this story start?
Okay, thank you so much, Erin. So for me, I first started developing chronic symptoms when I was about 17 years old. I had, a bit of a traumatic childhood. I was adopted at age 12, and there was a big difference in my life before adoption and after, and both had parts that were really great and also parts that were really unhealthy and caused a lot of maybe like distortions in my thinking. And I think when I got adopted in my life, like I never really knew how to ask for help. I just thought, oh, I just need to fake it until I get out of here, until I move away. And so there was so much that I buried while I was just trying so hard, trying. That's like has been a theme. And I think I had some perfectionistic tendencies. And then around age 17, I started getting sleepy all the time. And now I know that was the beginning stages of narcolepsy. But it took me about 8 years to get diagnosed with it. And so during that time, I was, living on my own, working multiple jobs, riding my bike 10 miles a day to two different minimum wage paying jobs, all with narcolepsy. It was just a rough few years. And I think a lot of people with chronic illnesses can relate to just like that period of time where you don't know what's going on, but you know something's not right. And maybe all your blood test is coming back normal and nobody knows. And you're like, no, I'm not crazy. Something's going on. And finally, I got diagnosed with that a long time later. But there is also other things that were going on as well that it just kind of snowballed. And so I think that that's kind of really what started my stages with chronic illnesses. I have other ones as well. I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, hypermobile type, and I was diagnosed with that as well as POTS in 2019. So that was actually pretty recent. So, and then I'm pretty sure I also have chronic fatigue syndrome. And there's just like a lot of things that, have been going on. And then it wasn't until I think it was about last year or maybe the year before that after going to doctors for years and years and trying all of the different things that I first started realizing that there might be a better way out.
Yeah, and it's so interesting just to hear how the progression of things, I think that's also very familiar to folks with chronic illness. Like it starts with one kind of specific symptom and then it just expands and expands and expands. And that also, that we had talked about that before, just how with narcolepsy specifically, but I think also with like EDS and POTS, getting that diagnosis is so hard. And you were saying about how narcolepsy is just like so not understood. It's missed so much. And I mean, you said what, 8 years till you got diagnosed. So that's a really long time. And I think that is the hallmark of chronic illness journeys as well, is that feeling of, I know I'm not crazy. I know that there's a palpable shift in like how I was and how I am. And it can be really, really hard. I mean, that's a long time to endure that feeling of like, I know something is wrong, but you're telling me, what were they telling you? Like nothing was wrong, or we just don't know what's going on, or what was the message you were getting?
All different kinds of things, because they would run all these tests and then nothing, everything would come back normal. They'd be like, okay, well, after a while, the doctors are like, okay, something's like, I don't think that something's really going on. Like in
Uh-huh.
the treatment for narcolepsy is you're sleepy all the time, so it's stimulant. So it's like,
Mm,
you know, I just would get accused of being a hypochondriac, or like not in those words, but like it's all in your head. Or like I would come to the doctor every few months and be like, okay, well, let's try these tests. I've been researching. Maybe it's adrenal fatigue, maybe
mm,
hormone. Like, can we test this? Can we test this? And so they would be doing all these tests and everything came back normal, because narcolepsy can only be diagnosed with this super antiquated daytime sleep test that isn't really reliable anyways. And so, yeah, just years and years of just like, I think that out of my entire life, I've gone through some really hard things, and that was the hardest thing I've ever been through, is going through those years of just like sleeping nonstop, not being able to stay awake at all. And the doctor's just like, well, we don't know. I guess, here's some Adderall. And then the way that I began coping with my chronic illnesses was through substance abuse, which led to alcoholism, I have a long history in my family. And so it wasn't until 2016 that I got sober. And then also, that's the same year I got diagnosed with narcolepsy
mm.
and apnea, which now I know my sleep apnea is from Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, because my throat closes because it's so weak and hypermobile. Yeah. And so then a few years later is when I was diagnosed with all of the other stuff, because I got really sick working as a nurse. I think it was maybe long COVID, or maybe it was like stress related, but my body basically was like, no, we can't function anymore.
It's so interesting to hear these stories, because they're obviously very different, and like the how and the why we get to where we get with our illnesses are different, but there's also just so much similarity from story to story, like especially the going to the doctor and advocating for yourself and being like, okay, here's some labs that I looked up, here's some other things we could try. And as a naturopath, I'm kind of used to that, because by the time people get to me, they are like experts in self-advocacy. But I know from what they have told me, and maybe you experience this, a lot of conventional doctors don't like that, because they have their tests that they do, and it gets to be like this weird ego thing of like, don't tell me how to do my job or whatever it is. But at the same time, it's like, well, but you're not helping me. So like, and you're the only one that can do these things for me. So like, can we please work together a little bit here? Did you have doctors who were amenable to like running the things you brought, or did you have to kind of work to find someone who would be more open-minded, so to speak?
Yeah. So my first doctor that I went to, that I was going to like every few months, like, okay, can we try this? Can we try this? She was, nice, and she was okay with it. But after a while, after a year of the same 20-year-old in your office every 3 months with a long list of things to try, she was just kind of like, she got, what do you call, not burnt out, not detached, but there was kind of just like
Yeah.
callousness, I guess, which
Mm,
I understand. Maybe it was a way that she had to do that to kind of protect herself. I don't know. But
sure.
so, yeah, then after that, I went several years where my life just kind of spiraled out of control, and I wasn't going to doctors. I was self-medicating. And because I had spent so much time and so much money, I think that that's another thing. It's like when you don't have a lot of money, like, and you're sick and it's like it can get so expensive. My sister just went to the doctor 2 weeks ago. She's been having like flu-like symptoms for like 3 weeks
Mm,
at least, and she can't work. And so she went to the doctor, and he basically told her he thought she was depressed. And she was like, well, 3 weeks ago, I was fine. It was the whole thing about he got in his ego, just all this crazy stuff. And it was so weird talking to her, because it brought back so many memories. And disheartening that it's like, that's how things really still are,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's so crazy that's like
Yeah.
that's still like that. So many people, like, even talking about this on my social media and stuff, so many people have messaged me and been like, I got a POTS diagnosis because of you, or like, oh my gosh, wait, that's what's going on with me. Like, the doctors have been telling me that I'm just overweight or I'm just whatever. And then sure enough, they have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome or they have POTS or
Yep.
something. And it's like, we shouldn't have to be able to find our diagnosis through some random person on the internet?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And don't even get me started on the weight thing. I know that we both have a passion for that piece. We could go off on that for a while, but yeah,
Mhm.
it's like, it's either it's lifestyle, it's genetics, it's weight, or it's in your head. Like those are basically the conclusions you get to. And even if they say it's lifestyle or genetics, it's still not helpful. I mean, none of that is helpful, but it's like none of those provide an actual solution. And so you are just left kind of holding the bag of like, okay, cool, whatever you say, but I still feel like crap. So how do I, what do I do? But of course, then, if it's weight, then it's like, well, then lose weight. Or if it's smoking, it's like, well, quit smoking. But yeah, we know that those are not the reasons that people have chronic
Mhm.
illnesses. Yeah. And like you said, we should not be, it's like one of those things where it's like, thank God we have social media and we have this network of humans that now we figure these things out. But at the same time, I don't know. It's so, I think that's the problem with algorithmic medicine, is that if you don't fit in the algorithm, then you don't, like, you just disappear, like you just don't exist anymore. It's like if you either fit this and you have this clear path of like, this is why you're sick and this is the treatment, and if you fall outside of it, then you're lost in the system, basically. And with EDS and POTS, like all the things you mentioned, all these conditions, like they're not rare, right? Like we know there's thousands and thousands of people who have these things. So that's, I think, my like point of confusion with conventional medicine is, at what point are these things going to start to be part of their
Mhm.
wheelhouse, like where they're picking this up more often. And yeah, to the point of self-medication and alcohol use, I mean, I think that's probably a very common cause for a lot of substance use also, especially with things like chronic fatigue. I mean, any of these chronic illnesses make you feel so tired and so crappy. And so either you're taking stuff to like wake yourself up or just to numb. Yeah. And so, you don't have to go into it, but did you find that period of time at least a helpful escape? Because I think, a big part of my passion too is destigmatizing addiction and substance use, because we think of it as in such derogatory terms, but sometimes it's all you have, right? I mean, was that your experience?
Yep. I remember the first time I took Adderall, I almost started crying because it was like I had been sleepy for so long, years and years at this point, like working at it so hard. And it was like the first time in years that I actually felt awake. And it
Mm,
was a whole cloud lifted, like, and I was thinking, like, is this what it feels like for most people? They can just throughout their day just like awake. And now I'm on one medication and it's for narcolepsy, and it's maybe, I hope maybe one day I'll be able to get off of it. But for now, it's like the difference in me taking it and not is having really severe narcolepsy symptoms and being like a normal person.
wow.
And when I take it, it's like I can sleep 8 hours, function like a normal person. And then when I can't, I'm like when I was a nurse, my doctor took me off of it because of a side effect, which was, it shouldn't have happened. But I
Yeah.
wasn't able to work as a nurse. I had to go on medical leave because that's how big of a difference it makes. Like,
Wow.
I couldn't even function or take care of my patients. So it is like, yeah, it is crazy. But it also shows like if people can get properly diagnosed, there are treatments that can really be super life changing, but it just often gets missed so much. I was thinking the other day too about like, I feel like part of the problem is that there's really no consequences for doctors not knowing what they're talking about. Like every other area of the world or like business or anything, like if it doesn't go well, there's like immediate consequences, bad reviews, like there's health grades, but nobody really uses that.
No.
And like there's, or they might have to get worried about getting sued. But it always is interesting to me when people, I'm watching like a YouTube video or TikTok and they're like, this is not medical advice, ask your doctor. But I'm
Yeah.
like, well, what you're saying is so much more helpful and on point than what a doctor's saying. They should be the ones giving the disclaimers, but
Yeah. Right.
that's kind. sidetrack.
Well, it's so I mean, that is a really interesting point because there's no accountability for it, and yet it's so expensive. Like we put so much
Yeah.
money into the medical system. Like I don't know of any other thing where we're like, if we have insurance where we're paying a copay and pumping all this money in and there's no return on investment like 9 times out of 10.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's that accountability piece. I mean, from my, again, I, as a someone who sees people like who are kind of exiting the conventional system, just like the things that, like you said earlier, it's hard to fathom that it's still like this, and just people saying like, I had this symptom, so my doctor sent me to this specialist. I had to wait 6 months, and then that I saw them for 5 minutes, and they just sent me to another specialist, and it's just this like
Yeah.
ping pong between specialists. Now we don't even have like a person who knows us and has our history, and so it's so hard to get that sort of complete care, I guess you could say, because no one really knows us anymore. No one is taking that time to look at our history. They're doing a like 5-second snapshot based on their very narrow like slice of the pie, and that's it. And that's not ever going to lead to, I mean, like you said, there are treatments that can make a big difference. It's just like getting that all those pieces to line up seems so hard. It's like a weird medical roulette game. It's like you got to get the
Yes.
right doctor, the right test, the right time, the right whatever, and
Mhm.
then somehow it will work out. But that can take obviously years, like you said, 8 years for you to get one diagnosis. And how long after that until you got on the right medication for like the one you were just talking about?
Um, I think it was several years.
And you tried, I think you had said you had tried several different things
Mhm.
between now and then. Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So like even when you get the diagnosis, sometimes it's not like that's one huge relief. Like, okay, we've got answers and I have an understanding, but now what? So then walk us to that point of, I mean, it sounds like a lot happened at once. You got sober, you finally got all these diagnoses, you like something opened up in your world, whatever that was, right? So where does it go from there once things started to kind of click for you?
Well, okay, so I got sober in 2016, about the same time I was getting diagnosed. Also, that's about the same time I was starting nursing school, and I got married in 2017.
Oh my
So
gosh.
that's like since 2016, it has been crazy, which you'll probably like if you notice all of these timelines, it's been really my life's been crazy since then, which I think is why I'm still kind of trying to like decompress a little bit. But so anyway, so then I went did nursing school until then I graduated in 2018 and started working as a nurse. And then so that's I think 2017, 2018 is when I started on my narcolepsy med that really changed everything for me. Then I started as a nurse. Without going into too much detail about it, the nursing job I had was super toxic, because of administration and because of the way that it was ran, not really because of the patients. They were so sweet. It was just one of those very kind of bureaucratic situations where I wasn't really given the tools I needed as a new nurse. And even talked to chief nursing officer, and I was like, this is not safe. But I think at the time I didn't have a lot of the tools that I have now where I would absolutely be like, no, like I'm quitting, or
Yeah.
there are so many things you can do, but I was just like, oh, I'm stuck with this. And so I would be giving and giving and trying and trying. And I think that really I pushed my body way too far. And I remember leaving on those shifts and feeling just like a shell. It was too much on my body. Definitely like a traumatic situation. And so I was there. You're supposed to be on a floor for 6 months. So I was like, okay, let me just push through. I was there 6 months, and then I switched to the ER, which was actually because of how like just crazy the other department was. The ER was like super easy compared
Wow.
to it. Yeah. Yeah, because actually like you had great people on your team who like taught you, and I was given all the tools I needed. But at that point, which was actually I had to be on the other floor 3 more months, by the time I got there, my body started actually processing everything and I got really sick. So I was
Mhm.
only on the ER like 1 month before my body just like couldn't do anything. And so that's when I called my doctor about my narcolepsy med, which it was not related, but she was like, if you ever have this symptom, call me because it might be a side effect, which it wasn't. And for a short period of time before I switched doctors, which thankfully I did, but in that period of time, my body just I couldn't move around the house. I couldn't go
Wow.
check the mail. I couldn't if I had my bedroom was upstairs, and if I came downstairs, like, I was down there all day. I couldn't walk upstairs, and I filed for disability because I couldn't work, and it was like they were like I don't remember how old I was, like 25. They're like, "Oh, you're fine," but they probably thought I was lying on my
Yeah.
application. I can't walk 10 more than 10 feet without getting winded. Like, it was such a stark contrast. My husband would be like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "I don't know." But it was very so I don't know, that was in 2019. So that was all the time that, like, COVID was really first happening. So I did get COVID, so I'm wondering if part of this is long COVID, or maybe it was just from all of the trauma I'd been through, maybe a culmination of all of it. But from that point on, everything has been different for me.
Hey, Sacred Illness listeners, Dr. Erin here. I'm quickly interrupting today's episode to put out the invitation to you or anyone you know who has a chronic illness or chronic symptoms that would like to come onto the podcast and share your story. Our goal is to invite folks onto the show who have worked with mind-body medicine modalities and noticed an improvement or even a complete resolution of symptoms using this potent medicine. If this describes you, check the link in the show notes below that will take you to a quick application to fill out that will give us some information about who you are, what your story is, and we'll take it from there. And again, if you know anyone who might also fit this description or like to come onto our show, please feel free to share the link with them as well. All right, let's get back to the episode.
That's also like right before that, I had been diagnosed with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome because of a random doctor I saw for my migraines. He did a full body test and like lifted my pinky and he was like, "Okay, that's not normal. Like, you're really flexible." So
Wow.
he thankfully just was like, "I think you have this. Let me put in a referral." But that was a year away. Then they canceled it. So I Googled it. I found a clinic 4 hours away that took cash, or not took cash, but was just self-pay. So it was $400, which thankfully I like, that's more than a lot of people would be able to do for, a diagnosis. So it's like, I'm very thankful that I could afford that. And then I went, and sure enough, I had that. And then she's the one who suspected I had POTS. So it's like, even that was stepping outside the traditional. So, anyways, I started selling vintage clothes online to try to kind of cover the bills a little bit. And then I built that up. And then about 6 months later, I kind of got my strength back enough to work as a home health nurse part-time. So I was kind of doing both of those. But my POTS, that's when my POTS really like was having difficulties. So that was really difficult. But
How these stories end up falling together. It makes me wonder if they hadn't canceled that appointment for the EDS specialist or whoever it was you were going to go see, would you even know about POTS at this point, right? So sometimes these things that seem like roadblocks or annoyances end up being blessings in disguise, even though ideally you don't have to take things into your own hands and Google things and pay $400 out of pocket. Whoever you saw sounds like she was really a key player in helping bring together some of the final pieces. Yeah.
Mhm.
So you are managing POTS, you are managing EDS, you obviously have fatigue. When did you get back on that narcolepsy medication like pretty quick? And I know you were doing a lot for POTS too, like a lot of IVs and hydration, and like walk us through that part of that treatment.
Yeah. So all while this was happening, I also had two babies.
Oh my gosh.
I had Opal in 2020. So that whole time I was pregnant with her, and I kind of thought it was just pregnancy symptoms, but I also kind of thought maybe not, because I was having to drink at that time I put these little packets in my water. Every like 32 ounces was a packet that had, I think, 2.5 grams of sodium. So that's a lot. And then I was drinking like it nonstop, and I couldn't stay hydrated. So I kind of knew something was up. And then after I gave birth to her is when I officially got diagnosed with POTS, because they couldn't diagnose it while I was pregnant, but they were like, "Yeah, you probably have it." And then I had another baby in 2021, but I think maybe also the pregnancy was a lot on my body. But yeah, after I gave birth to Theo, then at that time I had a Metaport, which I still have, and I was on 1 liter of fluids, and I was drinking about 2 gallons of water a day with a ton of salt, and I could still and I was on medication to increase my blood pressure, and I could still barely get my systolic blood pressure above 100.
Oh my
It
gosh.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot. I don't know why I couldn't stay hydrated at all, and I was so hot all the time, and I've gotten a lot better since then, and that was one of the things that I was so excited about is this past winter, I was able to wear long sleeves, whereas last year, I could not at all.
Mm.
I'd be outside in the 30-degree weather in short sleeves and still be hot.
Oh my gosh.
It was crazy. But I think I first started realizing there was a problem or, that maybe there was more to the story when I started learning more about POTS because, well, really, I have dysautonomia because I also have other symptoms besides POTS, like the thermo dysregulation and stuff. And I was like, autonomia, like as in your autonomic nervous system. And then that really got me thinking, like, okay, maybe there's more to this because that's responsible for so many things. And a lot of my problems, are because of all of the issues with that. And so last year, around that time, it might have actually been the year before, is when I read the book, The Body Keeps the Score. Because I had heard people talking about it and I was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure there's probably a correlation. But I didn't really realize there was anything you could do about it. And I had done therapy off and on, but I would go and get a lot out of it. And then maybe like I would go for a few months and just get nothing out of it. And I was like, this is just too expensive to spend $100 every week for them. Like, I don't need to talk through it. That's my problem is I just don't ever stop talking in my head.
Yeah.
Like, I need you to tell me what to do. That was like a big turning point for me. I was like, oh, somatic healing, bottom up. That's exactly what I need. It just made everything in my life make sense because for so long I knew I had a problem with intellectualizing things and not being in my body. And that's something that I really struggle with. And it was a coping mechanism, but I didn't realize it at the time. It just seemed really hopeless until then. And then I was like, okay, let me tuck that back. And then I kind of put it aside. And then I saw like some random person talking on Instagram about that somatic therapy had changed their life. And so a year ago is when, I'm sorry, about 2 years ago, I read the book. And then probably about a year ago is when I first started looking into it more. So I found somebody near me who is a somatic therapist. Well, really, he's a regular therapist, but he just works as a coach now because there's just so much more you can do that, bureaucracy, they
Yep.
won't let a therapist. And so that was really a blessing because I've been able to trade marketing services for it
Oh, cool.
those things synchronistically that like lined up that made it accessible to me. And so I started doing that, and really everything started changing. I was able to get off my antidepressant, which I'm not anti-medication, but I had been feeling in my body for several years that should get off it because I was having a lot of side effects and I have treatment-resistant depression. I've probably
Mm.
tried every antidepressant out there, antipsychotics, everything, and it's like they'll work for a little while and then stop working. It was also a sign that I'm like, okay, it must be something else more than this. And one problem I had when I would get off of it is I would start having recurring thoughts of just like really defeating, limiting beliefs that would just cycle and they would get worse and worse. And it was like a huge aha moment for me whenever instead of getting spun up in those thoughts, was able to be like, that's interesting that you feel that way. What's going on in my body right now? Oh,
Mm.
okay, I'm feeling this right here. Okay, well, it's okay that I feel that. Let me just sit with it, breathe through it. I see you. I love you. Like, it's so different than just getting so spun up in my thoughts. Well, of course I'm a failure. Da, da, da. No, you're not. Like, arguing,
Right.
so exhausting doing that.
Yep.
And really anytime things would get hard, I would have all of these thoughts that were super unhelpful. And it was such a huge milestone for me to be able to just acknowledge those thoughts and acknowledge that they're there to protect me, but then to get back in my body and really like, okay, well, what am I feeling? And acknowledging and paying attention to my feelings. And I had tried to do that before, but I would be like, okay, well, I'm feeling sadness. I'm feeling disappointment. And with the therapist that I started seeing, he was like, no, those are emotions. Like, what are you physically feeling?
Mm.
And that was nice too, because how I would think before, I'm feeling sadness. Well, is it sadness? No, maybe it's more like disappointment. Oh, maybe there's some anger in there.
Yeah.
My thoughts. And so it's like, well, I'm feeling like, a big blue, heavy ball. Like you can't really get in your thoughts too much about that. And so
Right.
that's really when things started changing for me. My symptoms started going away, and I started paying attention to what my body was telling me and then started listening to it. So before I might would be having a feeling about things like I was feeling like I shouldn't do my vintage anymore, but that was my whole income, so that was really scary. So I would just kept pushing through it, and then it got to a point where I was doing this where I was like, okay, my body is physically filled with dread every week. And so I started listening to it. And so now that's something I try to do is listen to my body more. And like if I have to pee, go up and go pee. If
Yeah.
I'm hungry, eat. Whereas before, I didn't do any of that. I was always just in my head. I didn't even notice what my body was telling me.
So I think everyone who's listening is probably agreeing and nodding their heads along with you because, I mean, essentially that's what trauma does, right? It takes us out of our bodies because there are things happening outside of us that are making us feel not safe inside, or, it's making us feel ashamed of thoughts and emotions we're having or feelings we're having. There's a reason we get disconnected, or we just have to have an outside focus because that's like we have to manage what's happening out here to survive. And so we don't exist, we just have to focus on the outside world. So there's a lot of reasons we disconnect from our bodies, but I think that is probably like the hallmark part of trauma is it takes us out of ourselves. It makes us behave and show up in the world in ways that are not connected and grounded and embodied, and not in response to our natural needs, thoughts, inclinations, whatever. So then as a natural result of that, we are in our heads, and the head runs the show. And thank God we have brains that keep working when we're not in our bodies, but still, right? And so what you were describing with somatic therapy, I think, is really, really important. Like there is that continuous need to disengage from the thinking brain. So when you start to get into the body and well, no, what does it actually feel like? What is it actually? I just did this in a session with someone yesterday, and it's always so interesting what comes up, and it's like, well, it feels like a hockey puck, and it's like sometimes it doesn't make any sense, but that's the point. Like the brain has to like, how do we get the brain disengaged so you can just be with what's happening in your body? And I don't know how much you remember, but I think the thing that people maybe want to hear about is like how long until you started seeing symptoms go away, and like what started to resolve. Was it obvious? Was it slow? Because I know for myself it was like I almost like didn't even realize things were shifting until in retrospect I was like, oh, like I'm not married to the bathroom anymore, or I'm not having this, like these symptoms, they just sort of started to melt away. So I think obviously that's what people are like, okay, so what does this look like? How long does it take, and what does it look like?
I think I started on with my therapist about 8 months ago, and I started on your program probably like 3 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say it was pretty quick for me.
That is
Um,
quick. I mean, 8 months is very quick, just
yeah,
in
even
general.
though I have two toddlers now, so that is a lot of stress. Like if didn't have that, I feel like I could work on myself a lot more. But I think that what I've realized now is the way that I felt so triggered by my kids was because of my experience in the hospital. Uh,
Mm,
trying and giving, and it's not enough, and like and drowning. And so one thing that my therapist has worked on with me is realizing when I'm dysregulated, but I'll like start talking and I'll get really spun up and I'll start talking quicker and my voice gets higher and, and I'm like, and then I'm all like out here on the grand scheme of things. And it always is like this because and I'll be like, okay, Stormy, what color is my shirt? And then I'm like, gray. And he like brings me back and he's like, do you realize what's happening right now? You're getting dysregulated and you're way out here in the abstract and talking about like this is the way the world is, and it's like this,
mm,
you like just come way down to like the most specific as possible and regulate. And so I've been really watching my I guess my stress levels and noticing if it gets above a 4, stopping everything I'm doing, which is of course comes with a lot of privilege because most, if you're working, you can't really always do that. But stopping what I'm doing some, deep parasympathetic breathing and slowing down, because usually it's like what I was doing before was like I would be doing a bunch of stuff. Opal's, nagging me about something. Theo's like, and I'm just like trying to give more and more and more and do more. And it's like once I get everything settled,
Yeah.
then I can step back. And if I ever do, then I'm elated all day.
Yep.
So that's been a huge thing for me. So about, I guess, 8 months ago is when I started it. The more I was just able to stay calm, I was able to help my being hot all the time.
Hmm.
I started noticing that I needed my POTS medication less, and then I started noticing that it didn't help me really anymore. And that so now I just drink water. And then I started noticing that I was like couldn't sleep at night and that I was kind of jittery throughout the day. And then I started noticing it was because my daytime narcolepsy med was too strong for me and I didn't need it anymore. And so it's weird because it was like it was causing so many side effects. And then I was like, I took it away and nothing happened. I was okay.
Wow.
Whereas before, I was really sleepy if I didn't take it.
Yeah.
So it was that this has all been like really recent. It's like the more that I'm working at it and really trying to be mindful of staying in my body and listening to what my body's telling me, and like the better everything is.
Hi everyone, Dr. Erin here. So by now you're starting to get an idea of some of what the sacred illness paradigm is all about. The sacred illness paradigm is all about this question of what is your illness inviting you to become? What is it that lies within each of us that allows some of us to acquire so-called spontaneous healing or remissions? And what is the key to unlocking that innate self-healing capacity in each and every one of us? The Sacred Illness Blueprint is something that I developed as a guide to help you walk through this process step by step to learn how to move deeper and deeper within yourself to find these layers of dysregulation, of trauma, of limiting beliefs, of things that you're holding within your system that are keeping you small, stuck, and sick. Ultimately, if we ignore the mind-body connection and are not exploring the ways in which our nervous system continues to be dysregulated or in a chronic state of activation and stress, any healing modality that we put into our body from the outside in is going to be less effective, if not effective at all. So if you are currently feeling stuck, lost, confused, or disillusioned in your healing journey, feeling like you have tried so many things, you have tried so many modalities, you have worked with so many providers, and you're just not seeing the results you want, know that this is normal, and of course you're not, because this foundational mind-body connection is often, if not always, missed in all of these modalities. And just like we can't build a house on top of sand, our healing cannot grow and blossom and be strong and successful if the foundation is not laid first. So rather than doing something different but similar to everything you have tried before and expecting different results, I encourage you to consider doing something different altogether. This is where I invite you to explore the Sacred Illness Group Coaching Program. This is a low-cost monthly membership option that I have created. It's constantly open, constantly enrolling, where you can begin to explore this completely different way of engaging in your health, in your body, in your illness, and in your healing process. What is provided inside this group coaching program is the blueprint that lays the foundation and lays the path out for you to follow to begin to explore these deeper aspects of health, to truly get at the root of what is causing your illness, and from there allowing all other modalities to blossom so that you can actually start to see the changes and the healing take place in your body that you have been expecting and wanting all along. If you're ready and want to learn more, head on over to aurorasomatic.com, and at the top of the screen, click on Group Coaching, where you can read all about it and become a member today. I can't wait to see you on the inside, and for now, let's get back to the podcast.
Something I was reflecting on, because I've had a few cases, so to speak, of people coming in one session and just having like a major shift in symptoms. And I think it just demonstrates how when we are just ready, when things just start aligning and we just tune in and we're on the path, like things can start to click pretty quickly for people. Not always, right? But there's just something about that, like when things just start to line up and you really are doing the work, you're really listening to your body, you just shift how you show up, right? And it sounds like that's really what has happened for you, is you got to that place, there was just something about that book and like the somatic awareness, and you were just like, okay, yeah, there's like, this
Yeah.
is the piece, right? And as soon as you clicked into that and have started to shift, I mean, it comes back to the nervous system time and again. Like you said, it's in the name of POTS, or dysautonomia in general. It's the body saying, the nervous system is dysregulated, everything's going to be not functioning appropriately if that's the case. And so if you can come back to yourself, and that's my whole shtick, right, is talking about how symptoms are, it's like the siren call, except it's not trying to kill you, it's trying to bring you in for safety. It's like, come
Yeah.
on in, listen, because I've said this before, we don't listen when things are comfortable, like it wouldn't make sense for the body to feel really good to try to get our attention. That wouldn't work. And so symptoms get bigger and badder. As we were saying earlier, they start to pile on top of each other. And it's interesting too, sometimes when we finally find a treatment for one thing and then like another symptom or another thing can emerge, because that's the dysautonomia, the dysregulation in the nervous system is still there. And I was thinking about it today because I've been having back pain, and I was thinking about how like I could go get a shot, right, and like cover up my pain, and then I could keep working or whatever. And I've been seeing a chiropractor, and she's like, yeah, your pelvis is a mess, like we've got a lot of work to do here. And so if I were to take that shot, I would never need a chiropractor, so to speak, because I wouldn't feel anything. But like, what kind of damage would I be doing if I kept walking and sitting and doing all the things, doing all the things that I do on a daily basis? And that structural problem would still be there, but I wouldn't know, right? And I think that's kind of the thing with chronic illness, is we can, or just symptoms, like we can cover them up. And obviously with narcolepsy and what you're doing, you're really demonstrating beautifully how it's this both and, like there's a place for all of it. And to me, it's always about finding that balance between how do I support myself so that I'm functional and can like actually just exist and like get through my day, and at the same time do this work that's supporting the underlying cause. If my back pain was debilitating, 10 out of 10, I would probably consider getting some pain relief while I saw the chiropractor, because she would still be able to feel the problem, even if I didn't. But it's that like both and combo, I think, that we miss so much. And then we wonder why, ultimately we just keep getting deeper into illness and deeper into other problems eventually, and it creates this kind of spiral of, I'm taking meds for my meds, and I'm seeing this doctor and that doctor and 1,000 doctors. And my whole life is now about like just keeping my body upright, and it's not a life. It's not, there's not a good quality of life with that.
Yeah, that was a big problem with me because I was seeing like 5 different specialists, and when they all want you to come back every 3 to 6 months, it's
Yeah.
like that's every week or 2 you're at the doctor's office.
Yep.
And for one, that gets so expensive, and for two, it's like it's not feasible with my schedule. I have 2 kids, bringing them to that's just no. I was driving 2 hours away for one, 4 hours away for 2 other ones, and no, that's I just can't.
Right.
I think with my medicine, what I think will probably eventually happen, it might take 5 years, who knows when, but I think that I'll start having some side effects from it. And I'll need to decrease my dose and decrease my dose as my body really is healing.
Yeah.
Because it just has a lot, it has a lot of work to do, like healing wise. Because, yeah, and I think one thing that you were saying really struck me, how you were saying, like, once you start, it kind of snowballs, because I think when you have chronic illness, you're used to having to try, like, just to survive. Like,
Mm-hmm.
how I was saying with narcolepsy, working 2 jobs, biking 10 miles a day, like, just giving everything you have just to really, like, live. And so it's like, and this work here is a solution, and it's like I'm putting that same amount of effort in, and it's actually helping things, and then it's just kind of like all happens.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's almost like I can see it on either side. It's like when you pull like a thread, it's like it starts to undo this whole ball of yarn, and that can be in the direction of illness, or it can be in the direction of healing. But it's like once you get on that right thread or strand or whatever you want to say, like it can start to unravel and open from there.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, because I'm always like, this is the part that I just love more than anything else, is kind of like the underpinning of that mind body connection. And so I don't know if you've had any thoughts or revelations around that, but narcolepsy in general is so interesting to me. It's like it's like depression times 1,000, right? Where it's just like shutting you down so intensely and like, to the point of being not functional. And, like you said, throughout your story, like there's been so much stuff, like so much happening, so many things. I mean, just in general, having 2 kids back to back, like that's enough to make anyone tired. And then add on like the nursing job and the toxic environment of that and your childhood trauma. And like, it's no wonder your system is like, and now we sleep, So I don't know if that's part of what you've come to feel in your body, but what is your sense of why your body is wanting you to shut down like that?
I don't know. I've been trying to figure that out after we kind of talked about it and you showed me that thing in the book, of what it said about that it can be a symptom of trying to escape, which
Mm-hmm.
I definitely think that that is the case for me. But even also, I wanted to add as an aside is that my narcolepsy is even better than it was, even without my daytime med, because before, even with my nighttime med, I was having to sleep about 10 hours a night. And now, lately, as of the past probably month or two, I've just been sleeping 8 hours a night and I
Oh,
wake up fully refreshed, which this is all new for me. But as far as what's causing it, I'm not sure yet. I haven't, maybe that's just like a layer that I'll eventually uncover, but it's kind of always in the back of my mind, like looking for what's going on with it.
yeah. And it's one of those things. I was just talking to someone yesterday about this, a one-on-one client. It's the body is so incredible in that we don't necessarily have to know why. As long as we're listening to it and following its lead, that's often enough to release the physical component. And that is good news, especially for folks who sustained like trauma in utero or like, pre-memory, pre-verbal type traumas, because if we had to know what it was, then they would never be able to solve their problem, right? But the body keeps the score, right? To bring it back to that title, like it's such a beautiful and like perfect title, because the body is always going to hold on to whatever it was. And that's why that cognitive piece is so not necessary, because the brain might remember, it might not remember, it might have a clear, like you might figure out like the why in that cognitive way, and you might not. But the what you feel in your body, the sensations, the sensations that the emotions are bringing up, whatever that is, those body memories, those are going to be what lead you to what you need, and there's always going to be that sense of like, my body really wants this right now. Even the simple things, like you said, like going to the bathroom, drinking water, like feeding yourself when you're hungry, all of these ways that we are detached from ourselves. And of course, our modern world, like I think about school kids who have bathroom breaks at certain times. We're like, from the get-go, we're training kids to just disconnect from their bodies. And so there's just so many ways that our world is not conducive for this work. But I think it's even more of a reason why, my whole mission is to just get more and more people back in our bodies, because the more we do that, the more we realize, oh, this is why I feel so sick. Even if it's not chronic illness, there's still a price to be paid for being in our heads, being disconnected from our bodies. And that could just be anxiety or depression or, like little aches and pains or fatigue, like these symptoms that are sometimes not big enough to go to the doctor for, or we just like drink coffee in the morning and then like take a lavender something at night to fall asleep. But we're still like, I think it's still that overarching thing of the body keeps the score. It holds on to all these experiences. That subconscious mind is constantly scanning and remembering and like making associations and causing certain things to happen in our bodies. And so it's this like invitation to come back to have this intimate connection to ourselves. So and I think your story also again kind of beautifully demonstrates how, like you said, you're like, I'm not quite sure, what the like message of the narcolepsy is, so to speak, or whatever. I just know it's getting better as I listen to my body. And that's it, right? Like that's kind of the point of this work. I'm just excited to know you, because I feel like this is a really exciting part in your journey. I didn't realize it had only been 8 months. Like to me, that's pretty
Yeah,
phenomenal.
yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. Like, what did you say this all started when you were 17? So to have, and you're how old now?
32.
Yeah. So I don't know, I can't do the math on that, but it's it's been a minute, right? So
Yeah.
so like that many years, because I think we also have this story of like, well, it took you this many years to get sick, so it's going to take you a long time to get better. But like 8 months compared to that many years of illness, like you can see that it really doesn't have to take years and years and years. if you're doing the right underlying foundational stuff.
I also wanted to share about how it was really helpful working with my therapist one-on-one, but I really love your program too because it addresses chronic illness. And it's like so many people with chronic illness, we have tried everything. We have been to the doctors, we have done everything where we've worked so hard just to like hold down a job and we are struggling. And it's like, I love your program and I believe in it so much because it like to go from how I was 2 years ago to where I was like on IV fluids, I could barely function. I was like giving everything I had to where I am today, where even if something goes wrong or if I feel like I'm having a flare up or something, like I have the tools that I need. Um, is so huge. And to be able to give that to people is so life changing. And I really like how it kind of starts at the foundation of really even educating and then goes through a bunch of things that I would have never even thought are related. But like, I love all of the different activities, like really defining what your values are.
Mm.
Is one example where like really have necessarily thought that would be aligned, but like really, or not aligned, but put in that course. But it was so helpful for me because it made a lot of other things make sense. And I feel like that's a lot of the keys that are in your program really help make sense of a lot of the different things in your life. And then even how it kind of comes full circle, even the part like near towards the end of like clearing out things in your life that aren't, serving you and aren't part of the new you, basically, or like the healed version of yourself, and really looking at where do I want to go in my life. Like, because when we do heal, before it's like we're trying so hard just to survive, but then once we start healing, we have all this extra energy, we have more resources, we're capable of so much more. And it's like, how do we want to use that? What do I want my future to look like? And I think that for so many people with chronic illness, that we're not even thinking about our future because we're so sick and just trying to make it through the day. So it's
Mm.
really, really life changing. So I just wanted to add that too, that if anybody's listening to this that hasn't gone through your program, that they absolutely should because it's really needed. It's yeah, the people with chronic illness, there's not a lot of hope out there. And so your program really provides hope. So I wanted to add that too.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, I think that's a good point to think about too, is that when we are chronically ill, it's all encompassing. And it's like the only thing we know is when the next appointment is. It's this very head down sort of existence, right? Because there isn't, I know when I got diagnosed, my prognosis was like, you're going to have this forever. It's going to get worse. Yeah, they just laid out this path of a downhill, basically slope. It wasn't, this is going to happen. You're going to get, and we talk about in the program and just in general, like we know that what gets programmed in that subconscious matters, right? So not only did I have my programming that was making me sick, then I had on top of it this programming that was coming in saying you're going to be sick forever. And so part of the program is about giving that hope back and saying your body can heal. You can, there are options beyond what you're being told. And that whole like aligning your life to reflect that is a big piece of it, because as we say often in this work, the person you were leading up to your illness, those were the thoughts, the beliefs, the conditions that allowed illness to arise. And so there's this like invitation to create a new life. What do you get rid of that no longer reflects who you are, who you're becoming? How do you I mean, even you talking about the vintage clothing thing, like it was maybe seemingly like a small shift, because like you said, it wasn't a ton of work per se, but it just wasn't feeling it's those little micro changes we can make that have a huge impact on just freeing up our energy and our body to be who we are, to make space for who we really are and what really feels good in our body. So again, Stormie, thank you so much for being here. I know your story is going to resonate with so many people just because, like we said, it's your story and it's so many other people's stories. The experiences you've had, the things you've gone through. I relate to many of the points that you experienced. And so I just appreciate you coming on and sharing this with everyone, because as I said to you at the beginning before we started recording, the goal of this podcast is to give hope. It's to show people there is a different path. And that path is available now, right? You don't have to wait. You don't have to, there's not a lot of fancy stuff. It's your body, right? It's just learning how to be with your body and working with what's already in there. So thank you for sharing your story with us. Thank you for being here today. And we'll have to have that episode about health at every size pretty soon.
Yeah, good. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of the Sacred Illness Podcast. If you find this information shared here inspirational and educational, please share it with those you think would benefit from this work. To take this work deeper yourself, check out our website, www.aurorasomatic.com, where you can explore our coaching, community, and course options. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel where new content is coming out all the time, intended to inspire, awaken, and help you deepen your relationship with yourself, your life, and your world. We'll see you next time.